This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 129. We're continuing the conversation about how to effectively work with your spouse. If you're wondering how that's done, we've talked to several couples who've been doing it for years. They share their advice. That's coming up.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
The saga continues about the cops.
Great start.
I'm going to leave that in to show how couples work together.
Yeah, not well.
Last episode, 128, which is at redpodcast.com/128. Laurel told a story about the cops showing up at her door. But you're not the only one in this room that has had that happen. It happened to me as well.
I believe that. I'm innocent. You're guilty till proven innocent.
So imagine this. 7 a.m., minding my own business, sleeping. This was back in the day before I met you, and I wouldn't wake up at 7 a.m. or any earlier.
Yeah, I was like, you sure it's not 10 a.m.?
It could have been 10 a.m.
7 a.m.
Had this pounding at my door. This guy's knocking. I thought it was the FedEx guy, so I just slept through it. Get up to go about my business during the day, though, and there's a calling card on the door, and it's pink, and it says, warrant for David Hooper.
That's you.
And it was signed. Well, it wasn't signed. There was a stamp on it that said Sergeant, whatever this guy's name was. It was not a cop, I guess. It was a sheriff. Is that a cop?
I'm guessing so.
I don't know how this stuff works. So I called the guy because he left his number, and I get an answering machine, voicemail. And I said, hey, it's David, and I'm here, but you need to show up a little bit later because I like to sleep in.
So you're trying to let the guy know how to serve you.
I was going to let him know that I was there.
So
I wasn't
polite.
trying to run off or anything. So next morning, 7 a.m., in my bed, minding my own business, he comes back again. I was like, ugh, this guy. Call him again. And I said, hey, you're going to have to come back a little bit later if you want to get me. I called the switchboard or something, because it had one of those answer machines where you could dial 0 and get somebody. I said, what is this about? What's going on here? And she said, well, it's usually not a big deal. It's usually like a paternity thing. So I said, uh-oh. She couldn't tell me, though. So I had to wait. This guy's not calling. But finally, the next week, he showed up. He was actually super cool. And it turned out not to be a paternity lawsuit or any kind of thing like that. It was just an old tax bill. But here's the funny thing about it is that for some reason, they had gone, I guess, like 3 or 4 different places. They couldn't find me, and they finally showed up at my house. We weren't trying to get away from taxes, but we never got mail at our office. We just used a mail drop, and I'd switched offices a couple times since then. So it was a tax bill. I think it was like $60.
Man, you're like public enemy number one.
Yeah, this guy had to make 3 trips to my house.
Oh.
Waste phone calls. They couldn't just tell me. I mean, I was like, you could have just mailed it since you had my address and all. I would have written a check, but such is the government process. This is the Red Podcast. Red stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. This is the podcast for authors, speakers, and coaches. We'll help you expand your influence, reach more people with your message, and make money doing what you love. We'll show you how to build a successful personality-based business and live life on your terms.
And pay all your taxes on time.
And how to keep the cops at bay. We're continuing the discussion on this episode that we started on the previous episode, redpodcast.com/128, to get the very beginning of this. It's about working with your spouse. We've actually been working on Red longer than we've been married.
It's true.
We started Red about 8 months ago. We've been married 6 months. So we went to some people that have been in the marriage and working together game a lot longer than we have. Talked to dozens of people for these couple of episodes. One of them, Paul Bees, he's from Mystique Brand Communications.
Paul says, my wife and I started a brand development business in 1986, and our business and marriage are both thriving. The first year was the toughest. At that time, we worked out of our home, and it was tough to separate work from pleasure. If we had a bad day, the mood for the evening was tainted. The best thing we did was move the business into an office away from home, but not too far away. We chose a location within 15-minute walk, close enough that we could walk home for lunch if we wanted to. Not that we do that much. This also allowed us to stay involved with our children's lives as they grew up. I don't think we missed more than a couple games for either child until they moved away for university.
What do you think about that? See, I had an office that was on 21st Avenue. I was on 18th Avenue. Same kind of deal. I could walk, about a 10-minute, 15-minute walk. I never ended up going to the office. That's why I started working from home again.
Why'd you never go to the office?
Didn't want to go to the office. It was too much like working a job.
So what if your wife dragged you to the office every morning?
Maybe I should send you to the office.
Well, they're saying that they go to the office together, and then when they come home, it's home relationship time, and at the office, it's work time. I think that's a nice segregation of your day.
We talked about this on the last episode, 128, that we do have separate business and personal elements of our home.
But they all kind of blend together.
Sure. Yeah.
At the end of the day.
They do. But it's the same blend that you would have from working with a spouse, isn't it? Just one of those things that you have to manage.
I think you do. I think it's good to segregate areas that, say you both work from home like we do, areas that you can talk about work and areas that you can't talk about work. And that's something we were doing really well with for a while, and we stopped where we had no business talk in the bedroom. Like we could not talk about business in the bedroom. And that worked out for a while, and I liked it. And then we just got started talking about business again. So now it's like, we have.
Okay.
Yeah, you talk to me about this podcast every time you come into bed.
Oh.
Pillow talk.
Yeah, well, in fairness, no, usually what it is when I come to bed, I've just finished editing the podcast.
Yeah.
And I said, you sounded really great.
Oh, thanks. Having spaces where you don't talk about it in your home if you both work together. And I love Paul's idea of having a separate office so you can really segment work from play and home life. Paul continues to say, I believe the key to balancing life is leave work at the office. And while that's not always possible, especially during some of the downtimes we've experienced over the years, it works for the most part. I think one of the reasons we worked well together was because in the beginning we had different skill sets and responsibilities. My wife handled sales and I looked after creative. As the company grew, our responsibilities changed and now overlap quite a bit. But during the last 30 years, we learned how to effectively work together. The key is similar to life in general. Pick your battles and don't sweat the small stuff.
That's good advice, and we've already talked about that, about how we segment different elements of the business. We talked about this on the previous episode as well, how we separate the elements of Red Podcast that we do. I handle most of the audio, the editing, outlining. You handle the web, creative, graphics.
Mm-hmm. And the general awesomeness that is Red Podcast.
And the talent.
Actually, that's you.
Kathleen Booth of Quintain Marketing. She says, my husband and I are business partners in our marketing agency, Quintain Marketing. We founded the company 10 years ago and have worked together full-time ever since. During that time, we grew the company from just the two of us to now 8 employees total. I'm still kind of amazed that we were able to work together so well, and I think doing so either really strengthens your relationship or really taxes it. What has worked well for us is making sure that we have very clear and very different responsibilities that do not overlap, what we just talked about. We also physically have never sat in the same room, and I think the physical distance is important so that at the end of the workday, you enjoy actually spending time in each other's company. The hardest thing for us is not talking about work in the evenings or on weekends, and we often have to make a conscious effort to remind each other to limit the amount of work talk we engage in around our kids. What you just said, these people are reading our minds.
Now, that's the problem when you work together, even just when you're an entrepreneur and you're working on separate businesses, is it's so exciting. It's like all you think about and all you want to talk about. And it's like, how do we have a relationship that isn't just based on our business and growing our businesses? I'm hearing a common thread throughout all of what these people are saying, and that's to segment the responsibilities, what we just mentioned. That's something everybody has said is Don't work in the same room. Segment your responsibilities and set boundaries between your work life and your home life.
Terry Crow from Crow Fence and Deck Supply. She says, we have 3 couples in our lives, friends that work together like us. The thing I've noticed about all of us is that we genuinely like each other's company. We listen to each other, know when to let work go and when to get down to business also. I think that applies to us. We genuinely like each other. We're not here just because you have a skill set that's different than mine.
Mm-hmm.
She continues, mostly it comes down to communication, understanding, and honesty. I don't think it works for everyone. It can be too much for some couples, too much time together. I think it really depends on the work you are doing and the personalities of the couples. I love it. I don't have to try and figure out what happened at my husband's work if he seems a little off when he gets home. I was there, I know. Same for him. There are many little nuances that make it work. I consider us very lucky.
I like that Terry mentioned communication. I think that's the foundation of any good relationship, whether you work together or not. You have to be able to communicate, and you have to be able to figure out what works just for you. Because what works for you and me, David, might not work for the next person. It might not work for the person after that. But you have to be able to communicate with that person. And if you have a strong ability to communicate and the channels are open between you two, I think anyone can make that work, make a business work and a relationship work.
I think also having different skill sets, even if you're not working together, it's good to have different skill sets than your spouse, because you come together in any relationship in a way that's almost like a company.
David, what you and I have talked about on another episode when we were discussing choosing a business partner is that if both of you have the same skill sets, one of you isn't needed. And that's why it's really important if you're teaming up with your partner, make sure they have different skill sets than you. Otherwise, you're just going to be stepping on each other's toes all day long, and there's no point for one of you. And one of you isn't going to feel valued because the other person's bringing the exact same stuff to the table. So keep that in mind.
I think it would be unnecessary strain on your relationship, because while there are a lot of great things that come from working with a spouse, there is that downside.
Mm-hmm. Rebecca Cortman, who is the founder of nomadtogether.com, says, when things get bumpy, we talk through the issues and iron out a new plan that addresses the issues more closely. Create a specific time of the week to talk about concerns. This means that no one is bringing up problems in the heat of the moment and discussions are more thought out. That's great advice, because when something does come up, what we're getting better at doing is saying, look, let's not discuss this now. Let's pick a day and a time to work out this issue when we're both clear-headed and we're energized and we can do this. So I think that's really helpful. And if you don't just do it randomly when something comes up, if you have a set meeting during the week, okay, Friday, 1 o'clock, we're going to talk about the week, what worked, what didn't work, and we're going to plan out the next week. Stuff like that can really help.
That's a good time management technique. My technique of when something comes up, add it to the to-do list, but don't start doing it right away. Something very similar, being deliberate about your time, having those segmented specific meetings for segmented specific things, not just chasing tasks as they come up, being deliberate.
I got another piece of advice from someone a while ago on my blog, and she said, I want to get what you think of this, David. She said, for one day, I think it was one day every year, one day every 6 months, I don't know what it was, but you should completely switch jobs with your spouse. So your spouse does everything that you're supposed to do during that day or during that week, and you do everything they're supposed to do during that day or week or however long you choose. What would you think about that?
Have we talked about how I used to be a UPS guy?
Yes.
Okay. So UPS, if you know about that company, they start you in the hub sorting packages. And everybody who is in UPS management, at least they should, have been on a route where they're actually delivering the packages. They work people up through the company. And the reason they do that is so you better understand who you're dealing with and what all your employees do. I'm a big believer in that concept, and I think it would work great for us.
I don't know if you could do it.
What would that look like if you were doing my job all day?
Oh, dear. I'd be sitting in front of the computer editing the podcast.
And you've done that before.
I have done that. I can do that. I don't think you can use Photoshop, though. So that would be a challenge.
My Photoshop would be like a big marker, look like a 5-year-old.
Yes. Old school. That's old school Photoshop.
Like a 5-year-old with, they draw mustaches on faces and things.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it would look like.
Well, I think it would help you appreciate what the other person is doing. Because right now, if you just go up in your office and do stuff, I take it for granted that it just gets done and vice versa. And I think if you're open to that with your spouse, it could be an interesting way to get a taste of what the other person is doing and appreciate them for what they add to the team.
I think just general appreciation, whether it's for your spouse or for the people that are working for you, is important when you're running a business. You remember Obama, about a year ago, he came out and he said, "You didn't build that. You didn't build that." That was the famous soundbite. And a lot of entrepreneurs got pissed. They said, "What do you mean? Of course we built it." But I'm of the belief, like Obama, is that we all build this thing together. And if you're going to talk about it from a government standpoint, who builds the roads that allow people to get to your business? Well, that's a government thing. And who builds the business and who builds the business specifically? Well, that's going to be the people that you're working with. It could be your spouse. It could be your employees. So I take a general appreciation for everybody. And certainly it would help to go and do some of those elements of the business. You've seen Undercover Boss, Laurel.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about that here on the podcast before. And hilarity ensues when the president has to come down and work the line. But there really is a lot of value if you've ever watched that show. And any of us could be affected in the same way by doing different jobs and getting to know what our workers do.
It does make you appreciate it. My favorite was the Donato's woman. She's the owner of this pizza franchise, comes down and she's trying to make a pizza on the line. And the woman that's helping her gets interviewed separately and says, "I don't think this woman has ever made a pizza in her entire life." And that was funny to me.
And
but
she might not have.
Well, she had. She said she had grown up making pizzas at this
said.
place. Well, that's what she said. But she was far removed from that. So even if you, in the beginning of working, like Paul started his company in 1986, maybe in the beginning he was doing different stuff and now he's doing something else that his wife is doing the other stuff. It might help him to go back and, quote, make that pizza, unquote, and see how hard it is and gain that appreciation back. So never hurts to dive back into old things.
Your skill set can deteriorate rapidly. We've all had those experiences in life where something will take us away from an activity for a couple of weeks. Maybe it's running, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's some kind of creative pursuit, musical instrument. You go back a couple of weeks later and you're rusty. So think about not being exposed to something for months or even years. You lose it. Don't use it, you lose it.
Yep.
So to summarize what we've learned from all the people that we've talked to about successfully working with your spouse, the big things, a demarcation point of work and life balance. When you're at home, don't talk about work. When you're at work, don't talk about home. And also appreciation of your spouse's roles. And good communication comes with that.
And having separate offices.
Demarcation throughout everything.
Agree with that.
Yeah, you couldn't work with me?
Not in the same room. Have you seen your office? Because I have.
My office is a little messier than Laurel's office.
Mine's a little bit too anally pristine. It's like clean.
The messiness comes from being the creative juggernaut that I am.
The cleanness comes from being the anal retentive person that I am.
If you have any questions or comments, reach out to us. redpodcast.com is where to do that. There you'll find past episodes. You can also subscribe via iTunes so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, leave us a rating, leave us a review. That will help us to come up more frequently in the iTunes search engines. When you do that, more people can find us. We can build the real entrepreneur community. And we've got an app, Laurel.
Love the app.
We've got an app available for iPhone, iPad, and also Android. You can get it at the Apple App Store, the Google Play App Store, or via Amazon, and it's free. Just search for Real Entrepreneur Development. It should pop up. You can download it free. Thanks for listening. Any questions or comments, reach out to us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.
we actually like to work with each other. Sometimes. She continues, mostly it comes down to communication, understanding, and honesty. Oh, she didn't put the Oxford comma in. Not just chase. That was so good, Laurel. I'm going to play your theme song.
Laurel Staples on Red Podcast.